In this video, we will show you how to replace an oil pressure switch on this Kia Forte Koup. This will be located along the bottom front of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. We're going to have to make our way safely up along the side of this shield, up along the front of the engine. Underneath the front of the vehicle, we're looking along the back side of the front of the subframe. We're going to remove this plastic panel. The plastic panel is held in place with three 10mm headed mounting bolts. We'll remove each of those mounting bolts and the shield. A quick inspection of all of our mounting hardware as we continue. You want to make sure that you replace it as necessary. Hold on to that shield now. A quick inspection, set that aside. Now what we'll do next is dislodge the wiring harness from this metal bracket so we can start removing the bracket as well. That'll give us plenty of room. To dislodge this, looking along the forward side where my index finger is, there's a couple small tabs that we'll squeeze in and pull that wiring harness out of place. There we go. Just a quick inspection of that clip. We are going to be reusing it. If it was damaged, that's okay. Typically, you can just use a wire tie if necessary for the reinstallation process. Continuing on, you're going to find that you have four 12mm headed mounting bolts, two along the top, two along the bottom of this bracket. Let's remove all four and remove that bracket from the area. I'll be using a 12mm swivel socket for these lower ones here. We've got those two lower bolts out. We'll continue on to the two upper bolts. Keep in mind, these are the last things holding this bracket in place. Make sure we're holding onto that bracket for the last one. Remove your bracket. With the shield out of the way, we have a clear view of our oil pressure switch right here, mounted to the front of the engine. Before we can start removing that, we have to disconnect the electrical harness. This electrical harness has one locking tab right where my index finger is. You want to squeeze that in and pull this out of place. A quick inspection for corrosion of that wiring harness. We'll set that aside. To remove your oil pressure switch from the engine, use a 24mm socket. Unscrew it from the engine. There it is, friend. Before our installation, let's have a close look at our original oil pressure switch. Looking closely at the threaded portion here, you can see that there is some sealant on some of the threading. What's important to notice about this is that the oil pressure switch is really only screwed in approximately halfway down the threading into the engine. That's important to note because when we go to install our brand new oil pressure switch, we're going to repeat the exact same thing. Essentially, it doesn't bottom out. With the oil pressure switch out of the engine, let's clean and inspect the mounting port. And now we can install our brand new oil pressure switch. When installing this, you want to make sure you start it in by hand. We do not want to cross thread this in. Now, once you have that started in by hand, we're going to make sure that we turn it in several turns. But as I mentioned before, it does not need to be screwed in all the way to the point it's bottomed out against the engine. Once it feels as though it wants to stop, go ahead and pause there. We're using a short ratchet for this. We don't want to put too much pressure. Double check to make sure that's properly secured. Once again, there should be a gap along in between where that sensor is and the engine itself. Now that we've got that snugged up, we'll just feel along the backside. We should feel a small gap in between that sensor. Once you feel as though you've got it nice and tight, go ahead and double check. Make sure you can feel a gap in between the switch and the engine itself. Let's get that electrical connector on there. Line up our locking tab, press it in. Listen for a click, make sure that's properly secured. Now it's time to reinstall our bracket in this area. We'll get this in place. Start in all 4 of your mounting bolts before tightening any of them. They're all started in, snug them up. Make sure that's tight. Make sure that's tight as well. Now it's time for our wiring harness. We're going to press these locking tabs through this area. One last quick inspection in this area. Reinstall your shield. Start in all of the mounting hardware before you tighten any of it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.